Good morning from Europe to Africa, especially from Germany to Ghana. Yeah, we start our first chapter, bringing unity in Ghana. The resounding victory of the CPP at the 1956 polls so weakened the opposition that they decided to assert themselves outside the democratic framework. Their agitation in Ashanti in the northern region and in Togoland had already led to serious clashes, often developing into armed violence, in which some CPP workers were actually murdered. As our independence dawned, we were placed in the anomalous position of having to send the forces of law into now free Togoland to quell armed disturbances. These outbreaks were fomented with the purpose of discrediting me and my government. They gave the impression that we were not in control of the country, that we were not a popular government, that there was widespread discontent. In a country just emerging from colonial rule, there are many ills to right, many problems to solve. Time and money and expert knowledge are required to deal with them. The end of the colonial administration in Ghana left us, moreover, with a low level of education among the bulk of our people and no system of universal education. 60 years ago, and now we have 2022. Such a public is easy prey for unscrupulous politicers. It is amenable to demagogic appeals and readily exploitable by eloquence that arouses the emotions rather than reason. It was not difficult for the opposition in these conditions to discover grounds of dissatisfaction in which to plant and water the seeds of resentment and grievance. In Accra, they worked upon the tribal feelings of the Ga people and related them to the shortage of housing. They encouraged the formation of the Ga Shifimo Kpe, a strictly tribal organization in our capital that was fast becoming cosmopolitan. They fomented separatism in Ashanti and dissension in the north. They tried to demonstrate to the world that they, the opposition, had been right in insisting that what we were not ripe for independence. Ghana was the dinosaur of all eyes. Friendly and unfriendly. The world's press was represented in our capital, and what they missed, the opposition field informed them with their own explanations. No occasions, no event was too small to exploit in order to discredit both Ghana and the government before the world, and reduce the high prestige which our struggle and attainment of freedom had won for Ghana. Not often, surely, has an opposition been so active in sacrificing the interests of its country to serve its own ends in disrupting the essential national unity? I saw the state being undermined, its independence in danger of destruction, all in the name of democracy and freedom of expression. Our opposition used the press as a forum in a way that it had not been used in Europe, to fulfill and attack us as a means of destroying our young state. To have served writs upon them for libel would have kept us busy in the courts to the exclusion of our proper duties. Thus, under extreme pressure from my party, I was still hesitant to take action, having placed our fate in the working of a liberal democracy. I ardently desired to give it every chance, even at the risk of some abuse to which I knew I was open, especially in the absence of a legal code such as operated in the United Kingdom but had not been applied to the archive laws of the Gold Coast. We were finding that an administrative and legal pattern under which a colonial regime could contrive to maintain itself required constant piecemeal adaptation to deal with the very different problems of our need to bring order and unity within a democratic framework and to establish a firm base for our national development. Oh my God, this Kwame is just too high-leveled English, really. I have to learn as well. My reading and writing was never really good in English. It's not my language, my home language. I don't know. I just continue. Our toleration of the disruptive excesses of the opposition was accepted not as an expression of good faith in the democratic process, but as a mark of weakness and stimulated them to ever bolder action. The disinclination to take salutary measures was also being misunderstood abroad, where it was being regarded as a trial of strength between us, the lawfully constituted government, and the subversive non-governmental elements. We watched the antics of the foreign press with misgiving. It seemed as though our overseas critics were intent upon destroying us before we ever got started. Nothing was too small to be twisted as evidence in misrepresenting the strength and quality of my government or to support the victim of the growing strength of the opposition. In times of national emergency, the Western democracies have been compelled to limit their citizens' freedom. We were facing a time of national emergency. We were engaged in a kind of war, a war against poverty and disease, against ignorance, against tribalism and disunity. We were fighting to construct, not to destroy. We needed to secure the conditions which would allow us to pursue our policy of reconstruction and development. My government brought in the Avoidance of Discrimination Bill to deal with the control of political parties based on a tribal or religious affiliations. Its full title was An Act to Prohibit organizations using or engaging in racial or religious propaganda to the detriment of any other racial or religious community, or securing the election of persons on account of their racial or religious affiliations, and for other purposes in connection therewith. This Kwame. The effect was to bring the formation of the various opposition parties into a united party. Oddly enough, our show of firmness was reflected in a temporary change in the tone of the foreign press. The Economist, for instance, summed up the negative position of the opposition in a leading article. The article was the criticism that has always been leveled against the NLM party, and which is much more applicable to the present assorted bunch of critics, the United Party, is that while accusing the government of corruption, totalitarianism, destructiveness, and inefficiency, it has offered no alternative policies of its own. The opposition has two rather contradictory answers to this. First, that the United Parties is soon to announce a constructive policy, which has never come, and second, that its program has to be vague, or the government will appropriate and spoil its ideas. In Ghana, this fear is not altogether baseless. The only fundamental differences of opinion between the government and the oppositions is over the relative power of the center and the regions. Since there is no basic difference in their approach to, say, employment, education, and housing, the opposition can only criticize in rather woolly way, saying in effect that they would do the same things, only better and more honestly. Unfortunately, the fundamental difference over the relative power of the center and the regions went deeper than the economist passing reference to it would suggest. It was the core of dissension between the government and the opposition. It involved the whole question of our continuance as a unitary state exercising the democratic principle of majority rule. The opposition was employing the lever given to it by the constitutionally entrenched clauses enthroning the special position of Ashanti to force by disruptive measures the secession of the region. I have to make a small breathing break. Who shall understand all this? It's even hard for me. How the people, the youths of Africa who are not facing school, who don't learn to read and write, how they shall read a book from Kwame like this? This man studied in England. This is Oxford English. Oh my God. He know what he talking about. He know what he talking about. Patient. These governments have often shown a touching concern for the rights of the minorities. In fact, their concern has in some cases been so great that it has overlooked entirely the rights of the majority. Examples of this attitude may be seen in the exercise of apartheid in South Africa and the enforcement for many years of the Central African Federation against the wishes of the Africans of Northern and South Rhodesia and Nyasaland. It was the operative principle in Kenya which supported the supremacy, I don't know the word, of the European minority over the African majority, and was implicit in the view that the rights of that alien minority needed armed protection against the indigenous majority, the nature majority. In fledgling states, imperialist interests flourish where there is an atmosphere of dissension. They are endangered in an atmosphere of national unity and stability. For 2.5 years of difficult state building, my government took no action to limit the freedom of the press. The opposition was quick to exploit this freedom and soon debased it into license. Each day, its newspapers came out with screaming headlines about the perfidy of the government. They heaped abuse and libel upon my colleagues and me. They wrote and preached. They called press conferences with local and foreign correspondents. They addressed public meetings all over the country, stigmatizing the government and singling out me and my immediate associates for special attack, abuse, and ridicule. During the struggle for independence, we had emphasized the need for national unity, for the attainment of freedom, and for the enormous responsibilities of statehood that would follow. These call for a supreme effort on the part of every citizen. How could our people pull their weight with zeal and dedication when it was ceaseless being drummed into them that their government was unscrupulous, inept, and corrupt, that their leaders were venal and power-thirsty, and that the national effort was invoked not for the greater glory of Ghana, but for the personal glory of Kwame Nkrumah? Question. This was not freedom of expression. This was irresponsible license, and if allowed to continue unbridled, it could have undermined our state, our independence, and the people's faith in themselves and their capacities. Yes, I know the word, but sometimes English is not easy to read. This was the internal picture. The impact on the movements for liberation in the rest of Africa could be just as unfortunate. It was likely to cause despondency in their ranks and friction between us and their leaders, who might have no means of recognizing the falsity of opposition attacks upon us. The colonial powers would also not be unmindful of these happenings and possibly use them as a pretext for delaying their departure from trust and colonial territories by citing the magnified political battle in Ghana as a frightening example of premature independence. We came to the point where it was obvious that the government must take action if we were to avert the dangers inherent in a false situation. The imposition of any form of press censorship was an idea most repugnant to me, since it ran counter to everything I had always believed in, everything for which I had struggled in my life. Freedom of expression had been one of the essential rights for which I had fought. I had gone to prison for daring to say things the colonial administration had not liked. Our fight had been the fight for the freedom for our people and the native inhabitants of the land, against an alien regime that denied freedom. Now that we had won our emancipation and launched our national existence, were we to allow our independence to be endangered by the very people whose speech and action had abetted the colonial regime? We had embarked upon a course that aimed to push forward the clock of progress, where others to be given to freedom to push it back. We had to face up squarely to the question whether a settling less developed stage, eager to modernize itself in the interests of the community, threatened by the unpatriotic deeds of a minority opposition, could permit itself all the forms which established democratics have taken generations to evolve. A young state has to work double hard, has to deny itself many of the trimmings that have become the accepted norm in the older nations. Our experience is proving that democracy as a functioning system in newly emergent states must inevitably undergo many stresses. It is machinery and pattern of government are being superimposed upon social structures different from those in which they originally developed. Democracy has undergone development to its present accepted forms in the advanced countries in circumstances of compulsion that have yet to be reached in the young nations now attempting to throw themselves apace out of a stagnation economic. This is 60 years ago. Kwame wrote this. Out of a stagnation economic backwardness into modern industrialized settings able to provide wide material and social benefits for all the people. Yes, it is not at all accidental that the great exponents of democracy are precisely those countries where industrial growth has achieved its highest levels within free development, that grow accompanied at periods by social distress and discontent, was based upon fast private accumulations of capital and proceeded at a pace which was slower in the countries that embarked earlier upon the industrial road and faster in those that started later. My oh my, we have to open Nkrumah school. Nkrumah school. I have to translate this book in simpler words of meaning. Is brain crashing, really. Recently, emergent states like Ghana are having to tackle the task of industrialization at the period of its highest development in the old established democracies, in conditions which have precluded the amassing of large capital reserves in the hands of private citizens. Upon the government, therefore, devolves the task of planning and establishing the main base of economic development and of pushing it through at a speedy rate against the formidable odds of an uneducated population devoid of technical and scientific knowledge, and the lack of even the most primitive industrial foundations. Time is the essence of our problem, and we are in a duty bound to use the overwhelming mandate given to us by our people to advance their standards of life, to employ time for the purpose of securing the quickest possible economic and social development for our country Ghana. This duty resolves itself into the obligation to use the power bestowed upon us by the majority decision of the people to the limit of the task it imposes. To abdicate any part of that power to an opposition that has been repeatedly rejected by the people and engages itself in activities prejudicial to the independence, safety, engages itself in activities prejudicial to the independence, safety, and forward growth of the state would, I submit, be a betrayal of the popular will and trust. It would be completely incomprehensible to our people, and in the present state of their educational development would place our whole future in jeopardy. We intended to preserve the rights and freedom of our people so long as these are exercised within the limits of the law and without threat of the security of the nation. We welcome criticism, but we will not tolerate subversive and terroristic activities against the state and illegal acts designed to promote the selfish greed of a dissident minority supported by alien interests. Wow. In this case, I feel sorry for Mali, because Mali president has sold the land of Mali already 80% to Russia. So Putin is getting ready to come with the Wagner group, but it's okay, it's not a problem. We are here in Germany. I hope you people not forget your brothers and sisters over here in Europe and United States, the black brothers and sisters. From my side, I'm sending one world, one love, and next chapter will be continued. We are learning English reading with Laura Celestina from Germany. Bye-bye.